There is a certain kind of loneliness that does not come from being alone. It comes from speaking into rooms where no one turns their head. It comes from sharing joy with people who never look up, or describing fear to those who answer with impatience instead of comfort. A child feels these moments long before they have words for them. Their voice becomes something they study, something they edit, something they eventually learn to hold back, not because they want to, but because silence becomes easier than disappointment. And so they enter adulthood quietly, carrying an inner world shaped by years of unreceived emotions. A world where the deepest longing is simple, soft, and profoundly human. To one day be heard, without rushing. Without invalidation, without the quiet sting of dismissal. Chapter 1. When voice is FAD, a recognition, emotional beginning. There is a moment in childhood when a child begins to pay attention to the way the world responds to them, the way their excitement lands, the way their sadness is received, the way their questions are answered, or not answered at all. Every child begins with a natural instinct to express. Their joy erupts in laughter, their curiosity spills into endless questions, their fear reaches for comfort, their stories tumble out, messy and unfiltered, in the hope that someone is listening. But for some, the world around them is not fully present. A parent scrolls through a phone, a guardian hurries through a task, a teacher dismisses their idea with a sigh, a sibling tells them they are too much. Their words seem to dissolve before reaching anyone's attention. These are small moments on the surface, each one so subtle that no one sees the effect, but the child notices. They notice every time their voice meets silence instead of interest. They notice the flicker of irritation when they speak at the wrong time. They notice the lack of warmth when they share something important to them. And so the child begins to adjust. They speak a little less. They shorten their stories. They suppress questions that feel too vulnerable. Their voice becomes quieter, not because they lack thoughts, but because they have learned that their thoughts rarely land anywhere. Over time, the child's excitement becomes muted. Their joy is held tightly inside. Their sadness becomes something they treat as a burden. They learn the art of emotional self-containment, a skill that looks mature but is born from emotional scarcity. Others may praise them for being calm, easy, independent, but beneath those qualities lies a quieter truth. They stopped expecting anyone to truly listen. They withdrew from the world before the world even realized what had happened, and the voice that once overflowed with life slowly fades into something careful, controlled, and deeply aware of its own fragility. This is the beginning of a lifelong pattern, not loud, not dramatic, just a steady, invisible, shrinking off, a child's natural desire to be understood. Chapter 2. The roots of emotional silence rarely grow from a single moment. They grow from repeated experiences, often unintentional, within environments that appear normal from the outside. Some children grow up in homes filled with noise but lacking presence, voices everywhere, yet no one attuned enough to truly hear them. Busy parents juggling too much, guardians exhausted from their own wounds, adults who love the child but never learned how to listen themselves. Others grow up around conflict. When tension fills a house, a child learns to become small, to avoid adding weight to the already heavy air. Their needs feel like disruptions. Their emotions feel like inconveniences. Silence becomes a way to survive environments where vulnerability feels unsafe. For some, the dismissal is subtle. A parent who responds with quick solutions instead of empathy. A guardian who tells them to stop overreacting. A teacher who labels their curiosity as talkativeness. A sibling who mocks their sensitivity. Each moment, alone, seems harmless, but together they teach one message: your inner world is too much. And so the child adapts. They become the dependable one, the quiet one, the one who entertains themselves, the one who carries emotions quietly so no one has to carry them with them. They become low maintenance, not because they naturally are, but because it protects them from the disappointment of emotional invisibility. In some homes, the child becomes the listener, instead of being listened to. They grow up supporting the emotions of adults who should have been supporting them. They become little therapists, absorbing stress they were never meant to hold. They learn that their role is to understand others, while no one understands them. And while no one may intend harm, the effect is the same. A child learns to silence themselves. Long before they reach adulthood, these early lessons don't disappear. They hide inside the adult they become, creating a person who is outwardly composed but inwardly longing for a type of connection they were never taught how to receive. Chapter 3: The experience of growing up unheard leaves marks that the mind carries quietly. Neuroscience, psychology, and attachment theory all point to the same truth: consistent emotional dismissal rewires the nervous system. When a child repeatedly expresses emotion and is met with indifference, irritation, or absence, the brain adapts. It learns that expression equals vulnerability, and vulnerability leads to discomfort or rejection, so the brain begins to shut down. Emotional signaling. This does not mean the emotions disappear. It means they are stored internally, instead of expressed externally. This is where hyperindependence takes root. The adult who grew up unheard learns to rely solely on themselves, not out of strength, but out of conditioning. Attachment research calls this avoidant adaptation, a protective system formed when a caregiver is consistently distant, rushed, or dismissive. The child learns to detach from their own needs, because acknowledging them only leads to disappointment. The nervous system also plays a role. Emotional dismissal trains the body to stay in a subtle state of vigilance, always careful, always monitoring the emotional temperature of the room, always preparing to shrink if necessary. As adults, they may struggle to articulate what they feel, not because they lack depth, but because their brain learned to mute emotions to stay safe. They may struggle to ask for help, not from pride, but from fear that their needs will burden others. They may struggle to feel heard even when someone is trying, not because the listener fails, but because the body expects dismissal and cannot yet recognize genuine attention. This is why relationships can feel confusing for them. Being asked, "How are you really?" can feel like entering a room they never believed they were allowed to open. And beneath all of it lies a wound, so quiet that even they might not fully understand it. The belief that their inner world has no place in someone else's life. Psychology describes the long-term impact, but the emotional truth remains simpler, softer, and deeply human. A person who grows up unheard learns to live without expecting to be understood. Chapter 4: Adulthood brings freedom, but it also carries the invisible echoes of what was missing. For the person who grew up unheard, the inner conflict becomes a daily companion. They long for connection, yet connection feels foreign. They want to open up, yet opening up feels unsafe. They crave emotional closeness, yet they retreat the moment someone gets too near. It is not a lack of desire, it is the fear of returning to the familiar sting of dismissal. They become experts at listening to others while never revealing themselves. They offer stability, empathy, understanding. But when the moment comes to share their own thoughts, they hesitate. The words form, but something inside whispers that keeping quiet is safer. This creates relationships that feel one-sided, friendships where they are the supporter, not the supported. People admire their strength without realizing it is made of a lifetime of unspoken emotions. And then there is the loneliness, a loneliness that appears even when surrounded by people. It comes from carrying an entire inner world that no one else has stepped into. They may tell themselves that their thoughts are unnecessary, their pain is small, their needs are too much, but beneath those explanations lies the truth. They do not believe their voice will be welcomed. This is the quiet conflict, wanting to be known, but not knowing how, wishing someone would ask, but fearing that answering will feel overwhelming. Sometimes they try, they share a small piece of themselves, but if the listener responds too quickly, interrupts too soon, or misunderstands even slightly, something inside immediately the old instinct emerges. Withdraw, protect, stay safe. This tension shapes their relationships, their communication, their entire emotional experience. It is not a lack of capacity, it is the residue of a childhood, where their voice echoed into emptiness. And until something breaks the pattern, the echo continues. Chapter 5: Every person who grew up unheard eventually encounters someone new who listens differently. Someone who pauses, someone who notices the subtle hesitations, the quiet shifts in tone, the thoughts hidden between sentences. It might be a friend, a partner, a mentor, sometimes even a stranger, but their presence feels unfamiliar in a way that is both comforting and unsettling. For the first time, the person who learned to silence themselves feels a small opening, not trust, not yet, but the beginning of a possibility. When they speak, this person does not rush them, they do not minimize their feelings, they do not offer solutions before understanding the emotion. They simply